Well, good afternoon. It's Caroline Stevens, Seeking the Truth. This is going to be part one of a two-part series regarding food security. Food, glorious food. We all need food. But according to mainstream media this week, the British government's first disaster of 2021 is already in the making. And what would that first disaster be but a food shortage? Now, this is an article which has been written by George Monbiot, and he says the UK relies on fresh produce from mainland Europe, but port logjams loom, and we appear to have run out of storage space. He says, a few days ago I carried out a small experiment. I sent almost identical requests to two government departments. I asked the business department whether the UK holds strategic oil reserves. Yes, the UK keeps stock equivalent to 90 days of net imports. I asked the Environment Department whether the UK holds strategic food reserves. No, they aren't necessary because, and I quote, the UK has a highly resilient food supply chain. The government treats oil as a strategic asset, but food as a matter for the market. So what happens if our highly resilient food supply chain breaks after the Brexit transition on the 1st of January? It won't, the government promised. Our risk assessments show there will not be an overall food shortage in the UK, whether or not there is a deal. But when George pressed the department to show him these risk assessments, this plural turned out to be misleading. The government has actually only produced one assessment, a reasonable worst case scenario for the UK's borders. Well, this is grim enough. It suggests that the flow of freight through the ports could be reduced by between 20 and 40%, while trucks travelling in either direction could be delayed by up to 2 days. A big problem, as you can appreciate, for fresh food. This month, the National Audit Office reviewed the government's border arrangements and found them to be late, untested, inherently complex, high risk, and very challenging. The government's brinkmanship, intended to wrong-foot the EU, has instead wrong-footed our own hauliers and traders who have been unable to prepare with confidence. I mean, the adverts have only just been appearing on the television, haven't they? Now, I'm going to interrupt this article because I disagree with what the Guardian is saying, because the MSM, the mainstream media, just will not reveal the whole truth. Remember the common purpose meeting. The media and the government are dishonestly honest. Okay? So always have that at the back of your mind, because it all just fits then. So it says, I don't believe that for 1 minute that there's been it's a misdirection, this, because this wrong footing with the EU, there is so much evidence to show that our government is actually in cahoots with the EU. After all, who runs the EU? Who runs the British Parliament? They're all puppets. So it's like having a meeting with your own family. When they have these meetings, and maybe they play chess, I don't know what they do. They certainly have meetings when they don't wear masks, that's for sure. Our puppet government is a puppet government. Boris has no power. Don't forget, Boris was a Bilderberger before he became a Prime Minister. He will have been told when he was at Eton that he was going to be a future Prime Minister. So why are you voting still? Because it's all arranged. David Cameron was told when he was at Eton, you will be a future Prime Minister. Oh dear. The government is blatantly being dishonest. It makes out with the media that they've been having these serious negotiations. But the truth is, it's going to hurt people, because do people actually believe that our government would deliberately harm the people? Well, obviously they would. Right, anyway, back to his article. So far so bad, he says, but the UK's border is only one link in the food supply chain, and it may not be the weakest. If the ports are congested and the flow of goods reduced, we will need stocks to bridge the gap. Food traders will have to build reserves now and in December to cover the likely shortfall in January. So this means warehouse capacity. But there's a minor hitch. There isn't any warehouse capacity. Because you see, because of the pandemic, there's been a shift to online sales, and there's been a need to store protective equipment. Much of the spare capacity was mocked up before the second lockdown. So now, because these non-essential shops are closed, plenty of stock is stuck in warehouses. Any remaining space has been swallowed up by the 3 T's: tinsel, toys and turkeys. They've got plenty of them in Parliament. Goods for the domestic market will have to compete for warehouse space with goods for export, as traders expect snarl-ups in both directions. As I say, it's a catastrophe just around the corner. A survey by the UK Warehousing Association found that there is less than 3% spare capacity nationwide. Most of this consists of small corners, useless for major wholesalers. The association believes the situation will quickly become critical. While the government has spent £1.4 billion this year on border arrangements that would usually be made by the private sector, it has done nothing to ensure there is sufficient storage space, or indeed that food is being prioritised at all. Such issues, it believes, are best left to business. Well, isn't that strange? Because, this is me speaking now, during the lockdown which started in March, Doris & Co were holding regular meetings with business. Now, what exactly were they talking about? What were they doing? Isn't this just a repeat of all those pretend meetings with the EU, saying they're going to try to get a better deal? The puppet government is obviously into bed with the EU, and also the globalists, the food business. After all, how come police are allowed to go onto the premises of supermarkets? Remember, these are civil matters. How come they can do that? The police are checking social distancing and mask wearers. So they're working in cahoots. Remember the common purpose meeting. They're all in it together. That's when people like David Cameron and our present government, they always say, oh, we're all in it together. Yes, they're being dishonestly honest. They are all in it together. Right, back to the article. The government's confidence in the food industry is not shared by the industry itself. In October, the chair of Tesco warned of fresh food shortages for a few weeks, possibly a few months, after the 1st of January. Now, remember I was saying that the UK imports 73% of its fresh fruit and veg from the EU. Well, this article actually says the UK imports 62% of its fresh food, much of it from Europe. I did warn. It says we rely on European trade for most of our onions, mushrooms, tomatoes and salad, and for a critical portion of many other vegetables and fruits. Of course, people who are now primarily blocked, that I've had to block on my timeline, who said I was lying, said I was being ridiculous and scaremongering. I was the campaign manager for Brexit, and then I get these private messages accusing me of not being a Brexiteer. This is the power of being brainwashed, even by our own side. They said, oh yes, we can strike out there. Yes, with a government that genuinely wanted 4.5 years ago to leave the European Union. They never did. So they've made life so difficult. 4.5 years in cahoots with the EU. So who's going to suffer? You and me. They could have been making trade deals, bringing in fresh fruit and veg. Anyway, I mean, it was so ridiculous. People were saying, oh, well, Israel will send us oranges and lemons. Israel? Really? I think not. I think we've got a lot of delusion in this. If it wasn't such a serious matter, it would be laughable coming up with that sort of comment if you knew what was really, really going on behind the scenes. But the government isn't going to tell you because they're not your friend. In the dead of winter, with trucks stuck at the border, possible tariffs, a weaker pound, and no warehouse space, the price of fresh produce could go through the roof, if you can find it at all. Last year, before the transition deadline was extended, why was it extended? Come on, they were building up to this. The government did conduct wider risk assessments. They were leaked, though, and it was discovered that the government did foresee potential consumer panic and food shortages. Of course, because we are sensible people. We know these things, some of us. This year, though, the situation is greatly complicated by the pandemic. It seems to have decided that it's best not to ask. That's the government. So they're not in control at all. Or at least it's their agenda. They're not here to protect us. So is the problem confined to fresh food, says George, with neither strategic food reserves, although I do note the military have got plenty in reserve, nor a strategic risk assessment of warehouse capacity? George says, I'm beginning to wonder. Without testing every link in that chain, the government has no grounds for dismissing the threat of an overall shortage. While it now seems almost certain that we will face a dearth of fresh fruit and vegetables, could there also be deficits of some kinds of frozen, tinned and dried food? Now, I'm going to speak now because about food in tins, there was an article earlier on in the year which said that tin and tins were going to be in short supply. That's just something else to consider. So, George says, already thanks to a combination of austerity and the coronavirus, plenty of people in the UK struggle to afford a good diet. According to the United Nations, a healthy diet costs 5 times as much as one that is merely adequate in terms of calories. The number of people using food banks this year has risen by nearly a half. That's a huge proportion. Any interruption of supply will hit those in poverty first and worst. When the government was challenged on this issue in Parliament last year, it claimed it was not responsible for the supply of food and drink to the population in an emergency. Wakey, wakey, people. Not responsible. Why are we being governed? Why are we allowing this to happen? They say they're not responsible, but they keep putting us in lockdown. So they can be responsible for some things, but they're quite eager to put the blame on somebody else, as in this case. So it was claimed it was not responsible for the supply of food and drink to the population in an emergency. That is up to the industry. In other words, little has changed since the Irish famine of the 1840s and the Indian famines of the 1870s. It's the same reckless, uncaring attitude that, according to George, has helped kill 50,000 people in the pandemic. Well, I would say there was a lot more than 50,000 people when you consider premature deaths from cancer, failures of diagnosis, suicides, self-harming, and everything else. Do these people seriously think they're going to go to heaven? Strange, isn't it? The government is blaming the industry, yet it is actually their fault for failing to plan 4.5 years ago. On purpose. We had the audacity of voting to leave the globalist control of the European Union. Yet few people really appreciated that our Parliament actually had no real intention of removing ourselves from the globalist tentacles at all. They have no integrity. That's the truth. Just name me one MP that has not got some sort of conflict of interest, business interests. Shouldn't they be devoting all their time to helping the British people? All they're busy doing is this crony capitalism. It's them knowing in advance which businesses are going to thrive and then dishing out the deals without any scrutiny whatsoever. Jobs for the boys. They don't do anything to benefit the 99% or the 96% of us. We are just simply a cash cow to them. Now, here's the kicker, as they say stateside. Because we're leaving the single market and the customs union, the disruption, according to George, is likely to be brutal, whether or not a deal is struck. If Brexit causes further economic rupture, the shops are half empty and even the food banks can't find enough supplies, there is a real prospect of chronic hunger. And I have been warning people on my timeline since last October 2019. But search as you may, you will find no one in government who gives a damn. And those are George's words. And I'm going to finish off now and say, ain't that the truth? The MPs don't care, because it would seem that their target is the dgirl.com report for the 2025 reduction in population. You know, I don't want any more comments from people who say, why am I scaremongering? Because people do need to know the truth. And if it feels like I'm scaremongering, there's a lot of people that genuinely are concerned and who do want to prepare. So please just take yourself off my timeline if you think that this is inappropriate sort of language. It's taken all this time for the mainstream media in the UK to actually tell part of the truth. And if you don't believe in what I'm saying, have a look. And you know, there's always people who say, oh, it's the Guardian, yada, 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 yada. Well, this is why the elites have us all divided into political parties and getting us to read different newspapers. You should read every paper that you can, and maybe you compare the different stories, the perspective, but there is going to be some truth in all the newspapers. So if you want some of this substantiating quickly, go and look at Kent Online, because they also reported this week. Strange, isn't it? All the reporting comes out at the same time because it's government controlled. Because we know who owns the media. Right, so Kent Online says, the location of a post-Brexit customs clearance for lorries in Dover has been revealed as the town now receives extra funding to help it cope with the changes. We're in November, remember? And it's all going to change on the 1st of January. After months of speculation, a new border control point is proposed to be located at the disused industrial space in the White Cliffs Business Park next to the B&Q at Whitfield from summer 2021. A consultation has been launched by government ministers for residents to raise any potential concerns such as traffic and environmental impacts. The government's had 4.5 years to sort this out. It's always known that we were going to leave in this way. But they can build Nightingale hospitals in 24 hours. The government is more interested in the environmental impacts of this new lorry park, this site, than the plight of its potentially starving people. Summer 2021. So what's going to happen between the 1st of January and summer 2021? What plan A have they got? Or plan B? So it says the revelation comes alongside a £500,000 cash injection announced today to help Dover cope with the changes brought by Brexit. Brexit is the word that is going to be touted quite a lot in the next few months, because people are going to be blaming Brexit, the Brexiteers, for the mess that we potentially are going to be in from the 1st of January. The £500,000 sum is from a new transition fund and will be made to Dover District Council. Interesting. It will help deliver traffic management projects such as Keep Dover Clear, allowing residents and businesses to get around over the next few weeks and months. The plans are in addition to the multi-million-pound Freeports bid, which would see East Kent strengthen business links with international trade and manufacturing businesses operating across the country. MP for Dover and Deal, Natalie Elphick, said, "It was a key pledge of mine to fight for more jobs and investment for our area." Ah, that's the strapline for every MP in this country. I'm fighting for more jobs and investment for our area. But you've been presiding in a parliament that has basically been rubber stamping EU legislation for so many years and destroyed so many industries. But they love to say, "I'm here to fight for more jobs and investment for our area." Totally meaningless comments from people who have just been put into Parliament through a corrupt voting system. The ballot box is rigged. And don't forget, these people are chosen. Chosen not necessarily by the members, but by the elites. So we've got people potentially starving to death because the government says they're going to rely on the business. Government, who needs a government? The Deagle.com website, I checked it today, the population for the UK is estimated to, by 2025, to be 14 million people. That's 14 million. How are they going to achieve that, if it is to be believed? Well, it would be helpful to have a food security, wouldn't it? Matthew 15:14. Let them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind leads the blind, both will fall into a ditch. Now, there's a mum's forum on the internet, and this Guardian article was highlighted, and it's raised a lot of comments from all the mums. One comment says from a Remainer, "Yes, but we took back control, didn't we? Surely control is the main thing. We might be facing appalling food shortages and reneging on the Good Friday Agreement, but we took back control." Yeah, control. Somebody else said it actually doesn't matter whether you're pro-Brexit, anti-Brexit or neutral to the whole thing. Anyone who has the means to prep and doesn't is a fool. Somebody else says, "Yes, we now have big plastic tubs in the shed full of tinned food and a freezer full of frozen veg, as I think fresh will be off the agenda." Remember, if you're sat there with a garden, you might think, "Whoa, I'm okay. You know, it's going to take 6 months to grow the next lot of veg." But somebody else has put, "I'm a Remainer, but whilst there may be shortages in fresh food, I don't think you'll starve. I'm not for Brexit. Think it's a stupid idea, but I'm at the point where it is what it is. I've gone through the stages of grief and have come out the other side, and think we'll just have to make the best of it. That being said, I'll be the first to mutter, 'I told you so' to Brexiteers." As I say, this has been done by design. Any blame will be levelled at those who voted to leave, and what they're planning, our government is planning, is for you to beg to go back in to the European Union. And just to finish off, by the way, please do share this video. Please share, because we all need food and we all need to know the truth about what our government is planning or not planning. People may not be aware, but just after the Brexit vote, the referendum in June, the 23rd of June 2016, in the Daily Telegraph a week later, it was reported that New Zealand offered their best trade negotiators for the UK to make great trade deals with the rest of the world. And what did the British government do? They said, no thank you. Actions speak louder than words as well. They haven't done anything, not from the food perspective. They're just busy carving out the NHS. Anyway, this is part one of a two-part series on food security. I'll do part two, not today, because as I said, there's a lot here to digest. Please do share. It's been Caroline Stephens, Seeking the Truth. My website is carolinestephens.net, and I do not operate under anybody's umbrella apart from the big chief. Okay, if anybody's wondering, because I know my videos have been recently shared, the common purpose videos in particular are being shared on people's websites. They haven't approached me to ask permission. It's very flattering, but please don't be under any illusion that I'm working with anybody else. I'm not.